The annual game between the University of Alabama and Auburn University, known as the Iron Bowl, is one of, if not the, most intense feuds in all of sports. For one, college football is professional football in Alabama. As the two major universities in the state, the yearly matchup at season's end sets the stage to potentially claim conference dominance and derail title shots, but more than anything, a win secures bragging rights for the fan base to stun on their opposition until they line up again. Great games make for great moments, but this rivalry goes beyond the field. It's entrenched in a state identity that's led to government intervention, poisoning of trees, and a whole lot of beef.
This video is brought to you by your local Toyota dealers and the Toyota Tacoma.
Environmental damage is no laughing matter. We should all show love to Mother Earth and Father Sky. However, openly admitting to the crime of intentionally poisoning trees in the name of fandom is so outrageously absurd that you really can't help but chuckle. I'll get into the nitty-gritty later, but in 2011, a self-proclaimed University of Alabama fan, in response to a stunning loss, committed the heinous act to retaliate against Auburn. It may all sound incredibly silly, but this is a feud rooted in centuries of hatred that somehow normalized that behavior. Let's take a stroll down memory lane. During the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln passed the Memorial Land Grant Act, allowing each state to acquire acres of land with the explicit purpose of funding higher education. Confederate states weren't immediately granted access, but when Alabama's time came, several cities battled over the land, namely Tuscaloosa and Auburn. The state could allocate the land to the University of Alabama, which had shuttered its doors for years post-war, following Union soldiers burning down the majority of the campus. Or to the smaller East Alabama College, which after several name changes would ultimately become known as Auburn University. Each school had to stake its claim. As the less established uni, Auburn contended they were broke and desperately needed the grant to stay afloat. Bama sought the acres to extend the campus into other regions, aiming to become the state's preeminent university, effectively finishing Auburn's existence. Despite University of Alabama alums in high positions and claims of corruption to swing the vote in favor of the tide, Auburn was ultimately granted the land in what became the first true upset over its big brother. When it came to football, the schools didn't see eye to eye from the jump. Auburn got the win in the series' inaugural game and labeled it as their first W of the 1893 season. Bama, on the other hand, recorded it as the final matchup of the 92 season since the game took place in February. To this day, both schools record the game differently on their official athletic department websites. From 1892 to 1907, the two faced off in 12 matchups, with Auburn controlling the series, but the 1907 showdown resulted in the rivals' only tie and marked the end of their yearly game for 4 decades. So why would two schools in a football-obsessed state just up and end their matchup? There were a few claims, but it ultimately came down to pure spite. Initially, reports claimed the 1907 battle became too violent between players and disgruntled fans, unable to claim a victory, turned to throwing hands. While fans scrapping in the crowd is for sure a cause for concern, it was nothing out of the ordinary for the series, as tensions had always run high. On-field issues were thought to be a concern as well. Before the 07 matchup, Bama head coach J.W.H. Pollard had implemented an offensive shift into the team's scheme where every player but the center moved pre-snap. It was a nifty technique, but Auburn head coach William Kineholz thought otherwise. He viewed the tactic as an illegal motion and got so fed up with Bama constantly utilizing it that he threatened to cancel the series and lobbied for officials from the north to ref the games to avoid bias in favor of the bigger program in the state. Being so upset that you're willing to quit over a concept that was deemed legal is objectively hilarious, but the final reasoning, which had the most validity, really showed the trivial differences between both sides. In negotiating terms for the 1908 matchup, the schools couldn't agree on a per diem for their players. Auburn had a figure that they thought was fair, and Alabama countered with a lower amount. They ultimately never reached a compromise on the right price, and after an opportunity for the 1908 matchup came and went, both sides agreed to end things there. They say money is the root of all evil, but in this case, it just allowed both schools to stand strong in their pettiness and end their matchup over what turned out to be a total of $34. Besides the numerous attempts by powerful Alabama alumni to again cut Auburn's funding during the period without football, it seemed that both schools were totally fine with the series being over. In 1923, Auburn school president lobbied for the game to never come back in fear that football would overpower everything else for both universities. Years later, Bama's board of trustees agreed. A century later, the dudes were pretty spot on. It seemed that the universities had finally come to terms on something, but school officials didn't speak for the people. In 1948, under pressure from fans wanting the game to resume and both schools unwilling to budge, the state government had to intervene and threaten to pull funding from both universities. Alabama and Auburn hashed out certain details like agreeing to play at a neutral site in Birmingham, but the game had to literally be brought back through state legislation. In its return, the series birthed legendary coaches of the game and iconic showdowns that are simply remembered by monikers like Punt Bama Punt or the Kick Six, but the series has always been and will always be driven by the rabid fan bases of both universities. No matter how good or bad the teams are in a season, it's a matchup that fans circle on their calendars and count down the days for the next battle as soon as the clock expires. In 1964, Auburn head coach Ralph "Shug" Jordan summed up the feeling perfectly. When Jordan's Tigers entered the '64 matchup as severe underdogs and out of bowl contention, journalists questioned Jordan about his team's eligibility, and Shug stamped the importance of the game, saying the yearly battle was Auburn's bowl game. That quote helped propel the annual showdown to be known officially as the Iron Bowl, but the 1964 contest was also the first time the nation as a whole was exposed to the game. With the matchup being broadcast across the country, journalists from different states had the opportunity to cover the game and saw the droves of fans inside and outside the stadium display an immense amount of passion in a scene they described as nothing short of war. Even in the face of real conflict on the world stage, the fan bases still couldn't unite. Let's take things off the field and hit the basketball court for a second. In the 70s, while opening a new coliseum in downtown Birmingham, the new arena showcased an exhibition doubleheader featuring Auburn versus Czechoslovakia and Alabama versus Russia. When Bama took the court first, Tigers fans in the crowd pulled for none other than the Soviets. That meant during the literal Cold War, Auburn diehards had more smoke toward Bama than the team that represented an entire power that the country was actively beefing with. Seriously, you can cop an original ticket stub to the game over on eBay if you're interested. Anyway, as crazy as that may sound, none of it is that surprising. This is a heated feud that's featured opposing fans going to the far extreme after a loss, and fans of the same team reacting horrifically because they weren't upset enough in the face of defeat. The decision of which school to support is a birthright for all Alabamians. But no one has captured the pulse of both fan bases quite like Paul Finebaum. As a radio broadcaster based in Birmingham, Finebaum rose to national prominence with an excellent formula of sitting back and letting eccentric callers representing both schools duke it out over the airwaves. The recipe works because with each caller, you can hear the raw emotion in their voices. You can't fake it. It's such a unique look into the psyches of these fan bases, and I implore you to tune into an episode if you haven't already. The show has produced a plethora of classic lighthearted moments of trash talk from regular callers like Bama supporter Phyllis from Mulga, and not so friendly banter, but no other moment rivals the Harvey Updike and Toomer's Corner incident. In 2010, Auburn, led by Heisman-winning QB Cam Newton, rallied from a 24-point deficit in yet another one of those historic Iron Bowl showdowns that's now known as the comeback. The win was the largest comeback in series history, which surely stung Bama fans, but both programs had their fair share of remarkable moments they could hang over each other's heads. What followed after the game is arguably more memorable for both fan bases than the matchup itself. Typically, after every major Tigers victory, Auburn's faithful head to an area of town named Toomer's Corners to celebrate. They join in together and throw rolls of toilet paper over every object, namely the oak trees. Some may think it's odd, but it's a tradition that's lasted for years, and I'm not here to yuck any yums. So when Auburn completed its miraculous comeback in 2010, as tradition, Toomer's Corner was painted with teepee. You may see where I'm going with this. A scorned Bama fan who witnessed his beloved Crimson Tide lose heartbreakingly decided to take matters into his own hands. Al from Dadeville, Alabama, hit Paul Finebaum's hotline and detailed to Paul a joyride he had post-game.
The weekend after the Iron Bowl, I went to Auburn, Alabama, because I lived 30 miles away,
Sure.
and I poisoned the 2 Toomer's trees.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Okay, that absolutely sounds like an illegal act, and you can hear Paul kind of shrugged it off, but then the caller proceeded.
I put Spike 80 DL in them.
Did they die?
Do what?
Did they die?
They're not dead yet, but
They will be?
they definitely will die.
Is that against the law to poison a tree?
Well, do you think I care?
No.
Okay, I really don't.
Okay.
Roll Tide.
Yep. Not only did he admit where he was from, the exact poison he used, the lack of remorse, and the potential timeline of death for the trees, but he dismounted so eloquently with Alabama's signature fan call, Roll Tide. It was a masterpiece display of the hatred between the fans that played out live on the radio. What sounded like a crazed bluff turned out to be true. Shortly after being made aware of the call, Auburn's officials tested the soil and indeed found a poisonous herbicide. What may sound simply like trees dying was the slow deterioration of an iconic Auburn landmark where fans went to pay their respects through vigils. Not long after, Al from Dadeville, whose real name was Harvey Updike, was identified and charged with criminal mischief. Later in 2013, the same year Auburn uprooted the trees, Updike officially pled guilty. Throughout the process, the University of Alabama tried to distance itself from the situation. School officials obviously weren't proud of his actions and didn't claim Updike as one of their own, but Updike for sure repped them. This was a dude who named his son after Coach Bear Bryant and his daughter after the team's namesake. What may sound like a rogue fan seeking retaliation in a deranged way was actually just another moment that helped define this beef. University officials distanced themselves because, duh, but they really have no real sway in this feud. While both schools obviously support and field the teams, they act more as an overarching power, giving room to the fans to put their hatred on display that's kept the beef alive for centuries.
Thanks for watching this episode of Beef History. If you enjoyed this, we have plenty more dope stuff right here on YouTube. But if you're feeling something a little extra, you should subscribe to our Patreon. Over there, we have ad-free early releases of episodes, exclusives like our podcast Phys Ed, mailbags, and so much more.